Yo, Zenith Nation, welcome back to Catch The Zenith, the podcast where I document my journey to get better in life and business. Today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections where I comment on some of my most interesting posts from the week on X. And by the way, if you're new here to this podcast, I'm Nicola, I'm an entrepreneur and master student, so please share and enjoy. First post, how I know my true friends. First, I can tell them bad news and they will listen. And second, I can tell them good news and they will help me celebrate. So I really love this one. I think Jordan Peterson mentioned that in one of his speeches or in a podcast episode. And it's a really helpful framework how to decide who you want to have in your life. And quite frankly, on my journey, it was kind of like this. In the beginning, I was more like, especially when I was 18, 19 years old, I had way more friends than I have right now. And as I grew older, my standards grew. And also, I would say the quality became more and more important to me. And those two indicators that if someone is open to listen to me, if I have bad news and they will try to understand me and not share their experience or what they have experienced, they are really interested what's going on, why is something not that going well. And on the flip side, if someone's there and listening to you when you have good news and really celebrating with you, like cheering, like really there for you and generally happy for you, that's exactly what you want. And I think I became also a little bit, I would say, more consequent, maybe ruthless, I'm not sure, but I would say consequent is the right word, with people who don't meet the standards I'm holding myself up to, if that makes any sense. So when it comes to, for instance, habits, healthy habits, or mindset, stuff like that, I'm not saying everybody else should do exactly the same thing, but I have certain standards, and it's quite like, in the end, I don't want to be friend with everybody, obviously, and that's totally fine, no bad emotions at all. It's just, I think it's pretty valuable. It was pretty valuable to be more careful who you want to have in your life, because Charlie Munger said something like, and I'm hugely paraphrasing, like, a lot of people are complete rat poison. And that's kind of kind of interesting. It's to a certain degree true. There are obviously a lot of people that are not really high in integrity or loyalty, for instance, and being really careful who you let in your life. And that doesn't necessarily mean you can have like acquaintance, like people who you know, but you are not really, really close with. But the people who are really, really close to you, I'm really careful who I want to have in my life, I would say. Or I became more careful and thinking about, okay, does having this person in my life increase or decrease the likelihood that I will hit my goals? That's kind of interesting question. It's not too selfish, because that's a reciprocal thing. You want to make the other person better, and the other person wants to make you better. And then it's a pretty nice partnership, basically. And yeah, cheering you up and helping each other out. That's kind of nice, And surround yourself with people who facilitate your development or are good for the best part of you. And that's exactly, I think, what we want. And if they do not support you or do not try to help themselves, it's okay to lose them, No bad emotions. I experienced that myself. I had some friends I spent a lot of time during my period when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. 18, 19, 20, yeah. And that was a period in my life where I did a lot of party. But then I grew out of that. I started to take care a lot of my health. I started to work a lot, starting businesses, bachelor's degree, master's degree, internships, all that good stuff. And some people had different interests, and that's totally fine, They went their pathway and I went my way, basically. But when we see each other on the street, I'm more than happy to greet you and have a nice conversation with you. It's just not, I will presumably not spend that much time with you because we just have different interests. And yeah, I think that's something that serves me well, to accept, like, hey, we have different interests, and maybe for a certain period of your life or for a certain season of your life, you have certain friends, and there comes a new season. Maybe other friends are more suitable for that period. And I think a helpful question to consider when determining which friends you want in your life is basically, does having this person in my life increase or decreases the likelihood that I will achieve my goals, what I mentioned before. And you can really think about that. You can go person by person by person. And if the answer, like, give you two examples, like if you have one person who drinks alcohol, takes drugs, and yeah, but you believe that deep within their heart, there's a little bit good, But quite frankly, everything else is not that nice. And then you have another person who maybe works out, takes care of her health, is generally interested if what you're doing in your life, and you're making each other better. For me, the answer is then pretty clear. But I know it's a hard decision. And it's for me, as of also today, sometimes a pretty, let's say, it's hard to accept the fact that, hey, there are certain people, although I like them to a certain degree, they are not that good to me or for me, if I consider my goals I want to achieve in my life. And I think that's totally fine. So a really helpful question, does having this person in my life increase or decrease the chance that I will hit my goals? Next post. Again, a framework I learned from Professor Jordan B. Peterson. This is the rule of 3 for any situation. Let's do a quick example. Imagine you have a friend in your life, and this friend misbehaves once. Like this person was a little bit disrespectful. When it happens once, most likely it was an accident. But if it happens the second time, it's more like a careless thing. But still, it could be like this person maybe had not a good night's sleep, is somehow not in good mood, maybe hungry, whatever. But the third time, if the same person acts disrespectful towards you, it's on purpose, most likely. And then it's a good time to speak up. And speak up for yourself and say something. And not to run away like a coward, basically. Sounds harsh, but to a certain degree it is, because I believe we should say then something, and it's hard. Every single time it's hard for me as well. But I think it's a really helpful framework to operationalize when we should speak up. Like, first time, if somebody like makes jokes of you that are maybe not that appropriate, you say like, yeah, maybe it was an accident. The second time, still maybe an accident, but the third time, that's maybe too much. And then when you then speak up for yourself, or you tell this person, hey, listen, you did 3 days ago, you behaved pretty disrespectfully towards me. And then this person will tell you like, yeah, but that only happened once and I was hungry. And then you say, no, 2 days ago or 1 day ago, that happened another time. And then yesterday, it happened again. And then you have clear evidence and a good foundation on what you can build up this discussion then. And I think it's really important to like bring that up and sort things out. Otherwise, if you don't say anything, what I experience is always I build up resentment in myself, if that makes any sense. Like I'm then really like getting more and more angry on that person if they don't stop. And I say that as a former people pleaser, and nowadays I will never speak that label over myself because it doesn't serve me, and I'm no longer identifying as a people pleaser basically, because I can set clear boundaries and show people where the boundaries are, and I think that's really, really crucial. And I think this tool or this framework is pretty helpful. And obviously, the point I wanted to make, it's hard and it can be quite also disturbing. But I remember when I wanted to please a lot of people, sometimes I did things I wasn't 100% standing behind, but I did them just because of pleasing other people. And I think that's a pretty bad long-term strategy. If something going against your value, or if truthfully detest what you're doing, you shouldn't do that, obviously. Yeah. So long story short, whenever you are faced with a situation, think like first time is an accident, second time perhaps also, but the third time it's time to speak up. And maybe you don't want to speak up exactly in that moment. Maybe you want to wait maybe an hour, especially if it's a little bit more heated. Maybe you want to speak up exactly in that moment. Depends a little bit obviously on the situation, but I think then it's time to say something. Next post. Oh, I really love that one. This is a quote by CEO of acquisition.com, Leila Hormozi, a real power woman. She said something like, "Fear is a mile wide and an inch deep." So let me quickly unpack that for you. This means that fear looks huge and intimidating before you take action. But once you actually step into it, you see that it's not as deep or difficult as it seemed. So, when starting something new, whether it's launching a business, reaching out to clients, or posting content online, like I did a lot when I did my coaching business, which was in the first place quite, especially in the beginning, like also later, like quite a pain. Like I needed to jump a little bit over the hump and get myself going and record myself, for instance, like a story or something like that. But whether it's launching a business or posting content, fear can feel like a massive wall blocking your path. And it makes you think of all the worst case scenarios, for instance, like rejection, failure, embarrassment. But the truth is, fear is mostly in our heads. The moment we take action, the fear starts to disappear. We basically realize people are more receptive than you thought, maybe when it comes to outreaches, or rejection isn't as painful, and you get used to it. And success is more about persistence than perfection. But fear only feels big when you stand still. Once you move forward, you see it was just a thin layer stopping you, nothing more. And I think one of the best thing let's try to operationalize that. Oh, I have a hard time with that word, but you get what I'm saying. How we can put that into practice. I think one thing that obviously everybody tells you is breaking things down. Because, give you an example. When I wrote my bachelor thesis, I don't know, 3 years ago, something like that, maybe. The first thing what I basically did was I had this huge project, obviously. Fear is a mile wide, obviously, and an inch deep. And then this was like the big thing. I was a little bit anxious about it because I never did that. But then what I did is I created a project plan, like a disposition, and it became clear what exactly I want to do with this bachelor thesis. And I broke it down into steps, step by step, chunking it down. And then it's this huge relief because now you have like 20 steps you can execute, and all of a sudden it's not anymore this huge dragon in front of you. It's like a small little whatever that you can tackle. You can now tackle this project step by step. And I think whenever I fear or have fear, the first thing is to reflect and create a plan, And it's easier said than done. Obviously, not right now. I'm writing my master thesis, and it's exactly the same approach again. Creating a list, like I do that in my to-do list called Things. It's an application for Apple products, which I really like. You can also use to-do list, or simply paper and pen works also pretty well. But breaking it down is, I think, so powerful. And really, I think another part of this powerful quote of Leila Hormozi, "Fear is a mile wide and an inch deep," is really taking action. Because action will show you that, hey, the first hour that I imagined in my mind that would be then terrible is actually not that terrible at all. It's way easier than I thought. And I would argue that, and that's what Hormozi said, something similar, like most people procrastinate on the first hour, to do anything. But then the cool thing is within few hours, like maybe 10, 20 hours, you can learn so much about a particular skill, for instance, you want to acquire. Or if you are doing outreaches, like to get clients, to get leads, then after 1 hour or after sending 100 outreach messages, you get better and better, and the fear gets less and less and less because you have done it so many times. And taking action is so powerful. I'll give you another example. When I last year, it was the third exam semester I had during my master's degree, and I had some presentations, and one presentation I had, actually any presentation, but what I was doing with each of those presentations was I practiced this so many times that when I got on stage, quote unquote, I was ready to rock and roll, and I was feeling to a certain degree like, hey, I have done it before. It's similar what Hormozy said once when he practiced his presentation, which obviously was way bigger, many times. For like 30 days straight, he practiced it, I think 2 or 3 times a day, I'm not sure. But you get the gist. You do something so many times that it becomes like natural, it becomes like second nature, and it's not anymore that hard in the end. Still, it's challenging, but you do everything humanly possible to prepare, and then you feel pretty confident in the moment, because confidence comes from action and competence, and you need to take actions to become competent and also confident in the end. Otherwise, it will be quite hard, because some people tell you like, this is a natural born, I don't know, speaker. And obviously some people have a good disposition, like they are pretty good, inherently good basically. But I would say to a huge extent is they took a massive action. I remember there was one friend of mine, a fellow student, and he's really good in talking in front of other people and giving speeches. And I asked him, hey, how does that came? Like, was he always good like that? And he said, I was already during high school. I was like the class speaker, or I don't know how you say that, but representing the people there in high school, his class. And then you already see he took during that time a lot of action, and he got a lot of experience on this. So it's not like one like 24 hours and he became so good. No, not at all. It's just not pure talent, because sometimes I hear people talking only about, yeah, this person is privileged and had a lot of talent, but they don't see how many hours they put into that. They don't see, for instance, I remember a friend of mine telling me this, Roger Federer. Obviously, I'm Swiss. I love Roger Federer. And when he was a child, he used to play in a tennis club, obviously, or somewhere tennis, and where every other child in the evening, they went home after there was like a deadline. The only child who stayed and practiced alone and smashing the ball against the wall was Roger Federer. He put in more reps, more time, more discipline. And I think that's a huge part of success. And then you can be in the end pretty without talent if you practice pretty darn hard. Obviously, talent helps a little bit in the beginning, but imagine like Cristiano Ronaldo, really gifted if you want to say, but imagine he didn't work out so hard, didn't train so disciplined. What would happen with him? I would argue he would obviously not be where he is right now. It's always, there is a little bit of talent, but everything else, I would say 90% is just practice and doing more than everybody else. Next one, and this is associated with the quote by later Hormozy. It's a quote by Alex Hormozy now. You don't become confident by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by having a stack of undeniable proof that you are who you say you are. Outwork your self-doubt. I really love that one, because when I got into this whole self-help world or self-help book world of all those great books, which I really love, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and Atomic Habits, that's all great, but sometimes they're in some books, not all, I wouldn't say in those books particularly, sometimes more in other books like Think and Grow Rich, if I remember correctly. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was that book. Like, it was more about affirmations and believing something. And I think that's super cool. You can tell yourself, hey, I really believe that, or like motivating yourself in the mirror and stuff like that. Or like, obsessing in your mind about something but not really taking action. And that's exactly the misconception here, that only by shouting something in the mirror, affirmations in the mirror, you don't become confident, competent. You need to take actions. You need to prove yourself that you are who you say or claim you are. And if we look at identity, for instance, what the word identity means, if I remember correctly, it's like repeated beingness. Something you do over and over again becomes your identity. And that's a really cool definition, because it helps you to put that into practice. Then something you do over and over again builds up your identity. In my case, I work out 5 times per week, so I can say I'm a pretty fit person. This is part of my, or is my identity. Or I eat over 90% of the time healthy, and I can say, hey, I'm a healthy person. Or I do podcasting every single week. When I started podcasting, by the way, I wasn't that confident saying, hey, I'm now a podcaster, because obviously I have published at that point 3 episodes when I started. That was my release. So I have not done the big work. But what ended up happening is, after now with this episode, I think 191 episodes, I can say pretty confidently, yeah, I'm a podcaster, because I have done it so many times. And I'm not claiming that I'm super good, not at all. I think I have so much more to learn, because there are people like Chris Williams and Alex Ramosi, Jordan Peterson, and Andrew Huberman. That's like incredible high level, incredible high standards. And I'm basically at the start point, and I think I just need to do more and get better step by step. So, long story short, all this to say, shouting affirmations in the mirror, if it works for you, do whatever works for you, of course. But I think a more sustainable approach, long-term wise, is proving yourself by a lot of repetition that you are who you say you are. You prove yourself that, hey, I am that person who I'm claiming to be. Next one, and now will come a quick series of short quotes which I read in this amazing book by Jordan B. Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. I'm holding it into the camera for all folks listening on YouTube. 12 Rules for Life. I'm currently rereading this book because it's just great, I believe. And the first quote I want to mention here is, if you have a friend whose friendship you wouldn't recommend to your sister or your father or your son, why would you have such a friend for yourself? Remember, before we talked about how to identify people in your life that you want to have in your life, good friends basically. That's another thing, like, hey, if you don't recommend that friendship to someone else, why recommending it to you? That's the first one. The next one is, of course, it's easier in the moment to stay silent and avoid conflict. But in the long term, that's deadly. When you have something to say, silence is a lie, and tyranny feeds on lies. You might remember, before we also talked about this 3-step framework, when somebody is misbehaving towards you, like maybe disrespecting you, insulting you, whatever, like 3 times, and then you speak up for yourself. Because if you don't do that, you stay silent. And silence, to a certain degree, in itself is a lie. I think this quote also better applies to situations where you think like, hey, there is something inherently wrong. Like, people are denying the truth. And if people stay silent because they are cowards, I'm a little bit exaggerating, don't get me wrong, but yeah, sometimes it is like that, then yeah, that's not a good thing, because you are suppressing something, obviously. And tyranny, I think, really feeds on lies. And that's I really love that quote. Because of that, courage is a really important virtue, I believe, to be courageous and to sometimes speak up for yourself and not doing things that you think are wrong, if they are going against your values. And it's not always the easiest path, I would argue, especially like in my case. I remember during high school, I had sometimes really a strong, let's say, this feeling of justice when I saw injustice in situations at school. I would open my mouth and say something, and not all teachers obviously like that, and no bad emotions towards them, not at all. But I said something while knowing the consequences or that might go along with that. But I needed to say something because otherwise I would have stayed silent, and within myself perhaps would build up resentment and this bad feeling that, hey, that's not right, or you have really not nice thoughts at all then that goes along with that. So I want to say something. So that's a really powerful one, to be a little bit more, I think especially right now this is a really important one, to be a little bit more courageous and speak up for yourself. Next one, also of Peterson, still in this series, what I mentioned. What are you inclined to lie about, assuming that the truth might be intolerable? That's exactly like that's associated with the previous one. Like, hey, why are you lying about that? And the answer could be, yeah, you are pretty darn scared of the consequence. And obviously that happens also in my life. Things are pretty darn scary if you think about that. But if you don't speak them out, everything else, it's not good. Long-term wise, this is a pretty bad strategy. Especially like lying. Lying can help you maybe short to midterm wise. It could work out. But long-term wise, it always, like, everything falls apart. Only the fact itself that if you're lying, if you say in one situation X and in the same situation with another person you say epsilon, remembering those things is kind of hard, obviously, if you have a lot of human interactions. So actually speaking the truth is pretty cool because you don't need to think. You just say what's going on. Tell the truth, state the facts, basically. Next one, also a quote by Peterson from 12 Rules for Life. Perhaps happiness is always to be found in the journey uphill and not in the fleeting sense of satisfaction awaiting at the next peak. Quick story here. I remember a good friend of mine, one of my best friends, he told me that when I get this job or this, now it was like, when I get promoted and get this job, this role, everything will be better. And I think that's not right. And I told him that because at that stage you will have other challenges as well, and it will be maybe even harder. And that's something you just put in your mind, basically, to think that everything, it doesn't really help you right now in the moment. And I thought I proposed another solution or another approach, which is what I learned in the book Atomic Habits. That's like focusing on the process towards a goal is way more enjoyable, like celebrating the small wins on the journey towards the peak. And to make that really clear, it could be like I remember back like at university when I did my 12-hour shift learning for university, doing everything I needed to do, plus working on my business. That was a successful day, and it was like a reason to celebrate, and because I did what I intended to do on that day, and I maybe crossed off all the tasks on my to-do list. I still didn't pass then. That was not like, obviously working 12 hours is not the same like in the end passing the exam, for instance. Obviously I passed exams and I had pretty good grades, but you get the gist. It's like I'm enjoying the process towards passing the exams. And then obviously I passed the exams and I'm feeling good. But this moment when I remember last summer, I got back my grades, like this document, and I saw like I had actually really good marks. I had 3 6s. That's the maximum mark at Uni St. Gallen, and I was pretty grateful. And actually, it confirmed my hypothesis that if you just work utterly hard, or it confirmed again this hypothesis that if you work pretty darn hard and with focus, you can have a pretty good mark. Obviously, kind of obvious, like duh, but good reminder. And the thing I want to say is that in this moment lasts maybe for a few days. That I was really happy about those grades. But then all of a sudden, like, lives continue. And if I remember back, the process towards those good marks, that semester, was really, really cool. I really enjoyed it, although it was utterly hard. I worked like always Monday to Saturday. It was always 12 hours, like Monday to Friday, 12 hours, 7 start. I start in 7 and I stop in 7. Lunch break is no lunch break. I do desk lunch, and I have maybe like a 5-minute or 10-minute walk, and I'm going to pee perhaps, and that's my break. So, and on Saturday I would work again, starting in 7 a.m. and finishing in 4 p.m. And then I buy my groceries. Maybe I would work out, and I have a nice evening, and maybe reading, maybe watching some podcasts, whatever. But you get, and that was the process towards that. And quite frankly, I enjoyed it because that was the plan, and I executed on my plan. It was a pretty rewarding feeling then to actually implement what I intended to do. All this to say that I think having a goal is super, super important. Obviously, you need to know where you want to go, but then also breaking the steps down and enjoying the process towards that goal. Next one, and this is the last one in this series of Peterson quotes: is there one thing that exists in disarray in your life or your situation that you could and would set straight? So, I think when there are a lot of things in our lives going wrong, picking only one thing that could have the biggest impact is really powerful. Let me explain. So I believe in one of the major habits I need to follow in my life to have a productive daily routines and to be healthy and everything is sleeping properly. So sleeping 8 or 9 hours at the same bed times. And if I don't do that, this is not good. No, not going in a good direction. And if that's not going good at the moment, and there are other things, I try to focus on the most important one. And I think that's one of the most important things. And that's something I could improve. And it's something what I would improve most likely. And to make that really practical, what I do normally, I reflect a little bit on that. I create a plan. And something I recently did, because I wanted to improve something, was I wrote this similar question on the top of the page. And then I reflected about that, and I created some sort of a plan, and I made it really relevant to me. I explained, okay, why this thing is not going good right now, and what I need to do to change it, and why should I change it? How will I implement that? And what are the steps required to succeed? And once I succeeded at that, what will be the next big thing I will tackle to bring something else in order in my life? And like that, I have a pretty clear plan. And I think simply asking yourself, like, within this huge room or those many different things that could improve, pick one thing that could have the biggest impact in your life and that you are capable of tackling and changing. And this, maybe we can, later I have another Peterson quote, but let's continue with something else. And this is, I listened to a podcast episode of Alex Hormozi and Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett is the podcast host of The Diary of the CEO. Alex Hormozi is a successful entrepreneur and book author and so on. And they had a great conversation about business, self-improvement, stuff like that. A little bit more high level, a little bit more advanced conversation when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I wrote down 5 takeaways. And the first takeaway from this conversation was business ideas typically come from one of 3 P's. Either from first, pain that you're currently experiencing. Second, past profession where you acquired some skill. And 3, passion, something that you are inherently interested in. So, because a lot of people sometimes ask, like, where should I start? What kind of business idea should I pursue? And I have, quite frankly, to a certain degree with all 3 experiences, but particularly I would say with the first and third P, pain that you're currently experiencing, and third, passion, something you're inherently interested in. First, passion. I became really interested in productivity stuff, like time management, high performance, cold showers, daily structures, routines, all that good stuff. That was a passion. And a pain I previously experienced was I was once diagnosed. I was diagnosed in 2019 with ADD, and I overcame all the struggles that went along with that diagnosis. And I thought then, okay, I experienced that pain. I have overcome it. I have solutions, and I'm pretty passionate about productivity related stuff, because a lot of ADD or ADHD people have productivity related issues, like they procrastinate, poor time management, stuff like that. And I mastered that, and I thought, well, like 2 in 1 basically. Like, I'm passionate, I had the pain, it's authentic basically if I talk about that, and I really love those topics. So it was a kind of good starting point. So maybe this helps you a little bit to conceptualize where you can start. Like, either it's a pain you experience, you acquired a certain skill in the past, or you have passion for something. Next takeaway: A players hire A players, B players hire C players. Duh, we want more A players, obviously. Interesting thing, I'm not yet at that point where I'm a leader with a lot of people I'm leading, but it's something to keep in mind. But quite frankly, I am engaging obviously in teams, and I know the team dynamics. Maybe that gives me a certain credibility to talk about that. But what is interesting, and actually I experienced this myself, at university during my master's degree, I had, for instance, one group work. They were like, all of them were high performers, like strategy consultants, really smart people, A players. And what ended up happening, we performed pretty well at our group work we had in one course. It was like data analytics or something like that. Kind of challenging thing for a general management master, but it was interesting. Or for me as let's say, business administration guy. But it was obviously doable. And interestingly, I had other group works where we had some A players, but we had some B players, or even C players. And interestingly, when you have just one C player or B player, it lowers the standards, because the A player now thinks like, hey, B player is only doing this and I'm doing that, like way more. Why should I do so much? I could also do less and still it will somehow work out. So you're lowering the standards if you have like B player in your team. And obviously in that environment, you don't have that many options to get rid of people who are not so committed. That sounds a little bit harsh, but I don't mean rid of, like, how to deal with those folks or change the group or something like that. It's not always so easy, because then you need to contact the professor and change the groups, whatever. But in a business context, I think it's really helpful to, based on the stories other entrepreneurs told, that it's really makes sense to spend more time on hiring the right person. Just for reference, I give you an example. Sam Ovens, the founder of consulting.com and school.com, he interviewed 600 engineers, software engineers, to build his SaaS, his software as a service startup. 600, not 50, 600, just to reset everything, Imagine. And what he was doing, like, based on what Hormozi said, he was like interviewing the first bunch of people, and then they would say, or he would ask them, hey, who do you know who are really good engineers? And then he spoke to those folks, and yeah, like that he did it until he found his the best engineer, who then I think became his co-founder, one of the co-founders. So that's kind of interesting. So long story short, A players are really great because, quite frankly, A players want to work together with A players. However, B players, they want to work with A players. They also, even though want to work with B players, they want to work with C players. Otherwise, they need to work harder if they have an A player, or also if a B player is there who maybe performs a little bit higher than them. Takeaway 3 from the conversation of Hormozi and Bartlett, quote, it's an exercise in arrogance to assume that you doing three things is somehow going to beat somebody doing one. And so why he brought that up is because there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are jumping between things. And I did it myself. Like, you have this opportunity, this business you could do, and then another thing. And unfortunately, it's not really helpful because you always need to restart everything. And then he also shared two helpful definitions. The first one was focus. How to define focus? It's the quality and quantity of things that you say no to. That's what Hormozy said. I really love that. Like the quality and quantity of things that you say no to. Commitment, on the other side, is the elimination of alternatives. I think those two definitions are really, really helpful to conceptualize or to make that really practical. What focus means, what commitment means. And takeaway 4 was then, I think entrepreneurship is far more a war of the heart than it is a war of the mind. We can understand what we should do, but we just don't do it. This is why we are so much better at giving advice than we are at following it. So this entire thing what I just said, especially the first sentence that was a quote by Hormozy, it's like, we know what we should do, but we don't do it because it's sometimes more an emotional thing, also like why we procrastinate, for instance. And we are really good people who can, I would argue that a lot of people know exactly what they should do. And a lot of people don't need a consultant in that sense, like when it comes to high performance stuff. Obviously, some people are not that knowledgeable. That's fair enough, you want to learn. But a lot of people, especially with Andrew Huberman and all those great people out there, they already know a lot of things. But they need somebody who can hold them accountable. And for that, a coach is, for instance, great. That's what I was doing with my clients. Some clients, they needed a little bit consulting, like all the strategies about productivity. And other clients, they already were pretty knowledgeable when it came to productivity, and they needed more someone who holds them accountable, who is there, who's checking in with them, who's sending them every day a message on WhatsApp or in my coaching community. So, and I think one routine this is one thing I do on a daily basis almost. Depends a little bit on the season I'm in right now, but I did that many, many times and still doing it. At the end of the day, I reflect my day and I just think on one thing I could do better and one thing I'm proud of. Pretty darn simple. It takes 3 to 5 minutes. And it's pretty short, so I'm confident that I can do that till the rest of my life. I'm already doing that since maybe 5 years. Pretty long period. It's something I learned from Jay Shetty. I think it was in a conversation with Stephen Bartlett. I'm not entirely sure, but it was Jay Shetty most likely who brought that up. And it's so easy. And then I can give advice to myself, and I'm speaking that out loud. I did that many times when I was commuting home after working or after the gym. I would have a conversation with myself and tell myself what I should do better. I'm giving advice to myself because a lot of things I know what I'm not doing well, what I need to do better. So that was takeaway number 4. And the last takeaway, stay with me guys, that's a powerful one. The grass is not greener on the other side. Obviously, this is applicable not only to business, but to so many things, to friendship, maybe to relationship. And I would say, especially in a business context, it's powerful because there are a lot of folks out there, and I did that myself. We are jumping around different opportunities. Oh, we could do this business, we could do that business, but it's not really sustainable. Let me explain why. There are 5 stages associated with opportunity hopping, now let's put like the 5 stages of starting a new business. Stage 1 is uninformed optimism. So you see maybe this drop shipping thing you could do, and you're really, really excited that someone else is already doing millions with that, and you are really optimistic that this will work out. But then you start that thing, and you get into stage 2, informed pessimism. All of a sudden you see, oh, that's way harder than I thought. Well, I need to do a lot of outreaches. I don't know how to do anything. So it's pretty darn hard. And that's where most people quit. That's stage 3, valley of despair. That where nothing works out, nothing seems to work out. Like every sales call you mess up. No outreach messages work. Nobody's responding. Your content is not driving any engagement. And then you quit and you start something else and going through the exact cycle again. But if you stick to it, what ends up happening, you will arrive stage 4. And you can imagine that like as a U curve. It's like, and I should have explained it before, but on the x-axis you have time, on the y-axis you have the emotional state, like that. And it's like a U curve. And the stage 3 is basically at the bottom of the U. So really, really down at the bottom. But then it goes up. Stage 4, informed optimism. All of a sudden you see, oh, I learned and I got better in selling stuff. I now know how to overcome objections of my customers. So I get better and better. And I see like, hey, I'm optimistic, but now informed because I have the evidence. It's again like what we covered before. You take actions, you become better. And like that, you create confidence and optimism perhaps. And then the final stage is stage 5, success and fulfillment. You're exactly there where when you started thought it will be so easy, or when you saw someone else already doing millions. That's exactly the stage now where you actually wanted to go. Ideally, in an ideally world, obviously. And I think why this is so powerful, first, I would say it gives you like a concept, and knowing when you are in the valley of despair that this is totally normal and you just need to stick to it. Like I had exactly that. It was really, really quite kind of hard. Like because you're alone, you're starting the business and it's just you. And another thing why it's powerful, apart from helping you to understand that you shouldn't quit in the valley of despair, is doing something new is in 80 to 90% of cases not the right solution. But however, the right solution is more, you should do more of what you're currently doing and you should do better of what already works. So rather than saying, I will start something new, this doesn't work, say to yourself, hey, I will do way more and I will do it better. With more, I mean, if you send each day 20 messages to potential clients and it doesn't work out, maybe you should increase the volume. You should do 100 a day. The first hours of your day, you just send messages. It's boring, but it works. And I did it, for instance, with a startup idea recently. I sent every single day so many cold emails to SaaS founders to interview them to identify a business problem, because we wanted to build like a SaaS, a software tool for other software companies to help them get their KPIs right. Like because a lot of people track everything in Excel spreadsheets, which is pretty prone to errors. So I did a lot of volume, obviously. And after a certain period, after a certain week, 1 or 2 weeks, I actually quite faster. I did a lot of iterations. I changed the email copy, so I tried to make it better. So I did more and more, like I did a lot of outreaches, obviously, and I tried to improve it step by step, rather than saying I will immediately jump to something else. It's maybe not the best example, but it's one how to apply it. And it's again the same with, and I did the mistake, quite frankly, I have this podcast, obviously, but for a short period, or 2 years, I had another podcast where I started over a new podcast because I was doing this ADHD coaching business. Quite frankly, it wasn't that good of an idea because I needed to start all over again. Interestingly, it worked out pretty well because we ranked in the billboards or charts, I think it's called, in Germany, in the mental health category, on I think rank 55, something like that, within 3 months of launching the podcast. But I interrupted the compound effect of this podcast, Catch The Zenith, which was not that good of an idea, retrospective, but I did it. So it was a good learning in the end. Yeah, because I could have simply switched here a little bit the targeting on this podcast and continue and leverage already the existing audience I built up over the past 2 year-ish, something like that. So yeah, long story, all this to say basically that do more. Like in my case, I remember when I started out, I tried to publish every single week. And sometimes it wasn't that consistent. But then I said, I need to do more. I need to publish every single week, not with some breaks. And then I wanted to improve it. And I wanted to improve the quality. And the quality obviously improved along with doing more, because if you do more, you can also get better. For instance, in speaking fluently in front of other people, or in my case right now, in front of the computer. All right. All this to say that please remember that those 5 stages of opportunity hopping. Stage 1, uninformed optimism. Everything is roses. And then stage 2, informed pessimism. Stage 3, valley of despair, where nothing seems like to work. Stage 4, informed optimism, like, oh yeah, that works right now. And then stage 5, success and fulfillment. I hope that helps. And that brings me to the last post of today. Again, a quote by Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. Oh, today I have a lot of Peterson quotes, but they are pretty darn good. You must keep the promises you make to yourself, and reward yourself so that you can trust and motivate yourself. I think that is, and another quote by Naval Ravikant that goes along, or like associated with that, is integrity is when what you think and what you say and what you do are one. And it's kind of interesting, if we promise to ourselves something, like if somebody claims, like our personal example, if I claim to eat more, like in the past, when I wanted to improve my diet, I said, I want to eat healthy. And then I actually did it. It was a pretty darn good feeling. However, if I didn't do it, it was like betraying somehow myself. I said, I told myself, you will do X, but I didn't do that. I eat crappy food then. And then I thought, like, I'm actually betraying myself, and that's not a good thing. But on the flip side, if you over and over prove to yourself that you are who you claim to are, that you are who you say you are, it becomes reinforcing. And I really love that definition of integrity by Naval. Like, what you think, what you say, and what you do are all aligned. That's so powerful. It's obviously the ideal, and we human beings are all flawed, obviously, and we do a lot of mistakes, and we say X, but we actually do epsilon. I saw that many times in other people's life, in my life. But I think it's good to know what is the ideal state. And with that said, guys, thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next one.